with their thoughts on today's announcement and what it means for the way forward. We're now joined by Armine Yalnizyan and Kevin Page. Armine is an economist and the Atkinson Fellow on the future of workers. Kevin is the CEO of the Institute of Fiscal Studies and Democracy. Hello to the two of you.
Good afternoon.
Kevin,
hi, Michael.
Hi there. Kevin, I'm going to actually get you to start us out because these interest rate hikes, they are an attempt to get inflation down, but it already is down from its August high. We've also seen this cooling trend over the last 3 months. So why the need to bump the bank rate up another 50 basis points?
So, Michael, it's a fair question. The year-over-year inflation rate has fallen from a little over 8% to just under 7%. I think the expectation is that in Canada and other countries that we'll continue to see these interest rates come down as the global economy slows. I think what frustrates and bothers policymakers, the central bankers, is that what we call the core rate of inflation, the CPI rate of inflation when you exclude food and energy, is stubbornly sitting at a little over 5%. Which is well above the 1% to 3% range. So they see that as being a key interest rate that helps sets inflationary expectations. So they felt that they still needed this additional 50 basis point increase that we saw today.
Okay, the need for it. But, Armine, as we know, monetary policy takes time to filter its way through the economy. So in your opinion, was a big move like this necessary?
Oh, in my opinion, as a citizen, I would say, of course, it wasn't necessary. It's unclear that these higher rates are doing anything to the costs that we are experiencing. But the real big story here is the credibility of central banks, not only in Canada, but around the world, being able to tame inflation. And they can't do it unless they actually cause economies to slow down and slow down quite dramatically. We've really only seen 2 episodes of this in the past, and it is being assumed that we can cool the economy without triggering a huge recession by cranking up rates and slowing down demand and giving supply a chance to catch up. It's unclear to me that that is going to be the solution for this round of inflation in the early 21st century, but that's the story. That's the theory. Okay,
that's the theory. So why is it not clear to you that that theory might actually work out?
Because in the past, it has been about excess demand because there's been a lot of purchasing power moving forward. And now it is about just supply not showing up. We're trying to cool demand to give enough time for supply to show up. But raising interest rates isn't going to change Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And raising interest rates may or may not cause OPEC to release more gas onto global markets. These are the big things that are influencing inflation rates right now for food, for fuel, and for housing. The one thing that directly the central bank controls is housing prices. And while prices are falling, carrying costs are rising, and more people are staying in the rental market, which is crowding a market that is already doesn't have enough affordable housing. So you're seeing prices starting to rise there. So it's not clear to me that we are going to tame inflation this way.
Well, Kevin, what's your response to that? Because, as I listen to Armine, I'm also thinking about the dangers of raising the interest rate too high.
Yeah, Michael, I think, to Armine's point, I think a lot of this inflation is supply related, not all of it. I think the governor of the Bank of Canada feels that we have excess demand pressure relative to restricted supply. But I agree with Armine. I think if we look at some labor market indicators, the employment rate, the participation rate, they still haven't recovered from the pre-COVID levels. If we look at output growth, output growth since February 2020 has been about 2.7%. That's a 2.5-year period. In the year prior to the start of COVID, February 2020, we saw real output growth at 2.7%. So we grew just as much in 1 year as we have subsequently in the 2.5 years. So I think inflation is coming down. It's coming down in Canada. It's coming down in the U.S. It's coming down in Europe. I think there's a growth slowdown that is taking place. It's in the leading indicators now. We're going to see it in retail. We're seeing it in housing. we're seeing in asset markets. And so I think we are going to see a pretty significant drop in inflation, but unfortunately that's going to come with a huge cost to workers and to output.
Well, I was going to ask about that, and maybe, Armine, you can pick up on that point, because when you look at the inflationary pressures, one of the indicators is the fact that unemployment is so low. So who needs to be worried, who needs to be concerned with these interest rates if part of the solution would mean people losing their jobs?
Well, that's the definition of cooling the economy, is that fewer people are working the same hours and some people actually lose their jobs. I mean, look, we're talking about 7 rate hikes, and there were the businesses that barely hung on after 2.5 years of pandemic. Some businesses are folding, so we will see more layoffs. But because there are labor shortages everywhere, people may be able to pick up more jobs. And I am really concerned that the unemployment rate of 5%-ish is being viewed as unsustainable. And frankly, that when I was taking economics, that was kind of the goal of economics, is to have full employment. So I think it's in the eye of the beholder as to whether it's sustainable or not. But I just want to go back to another point about low unemployment is not only, but is partly a function of demographics. We are, along with every other country that had a baby boom after the Second World War, seeing more exits from the labor market than entrants to it. And we're all competing for immigrants to deal with labor shortages in high skill, low skill, high wage, low wage jobs. Like, there's tightness everywhere. And the idea that we can bring target inflation to 2% when underlying this phenomenon is a phenomenon we've never seen before, is a demographically induced labor shortage that is widespread and happening in multiple countries at the same time. I'm not sure you can get away with saying, oh, this is a terrible thing and people shouldn't ask for wage growth, when any other part of the market that had a supply shortage would see a price rise. So I just think we're playing with economic concepts that don't necessarily fit this moment.
Mm-hmm. Don't fit this moment. So I'm wondering then, as we pick up on that point, Armine, do you take any kind of comfort with the discussion that this might be at this current rate at 4.25%, where the Bank of Canada holds for now until it sees what unfolds in the first and second quarters of the new year?
I would think that that's exactly should be the plan anyway, though there is a lot more bearish players out there saying that we actually need to wrestle this inflation down lower. Don't forget, inflation is nobody's friend. Nobody wants inflation. Everybody wants price stability. So how do we get it? And maybe is monetary policy the primary tool for achieving it? Or are other things going to be necessary to actually wrestle some prices back down to earth after they skyrocketed? Prices go up very quickly, but it's very hard to get them to come back down.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Kevin, what do you think? Is 4.25% what we're going to be looking at for the first and second quarters of the new year, or is there a risk of another rate hike?
Well, I think 4.25% policy rate will probably be the interest rate over the next 3 to 6 months. If it's, the bank's assumption is that the economy will effectively flatline, we could be in a technical recession early next year. I think it'd be very difficult for the Bank of Canada to raise interest rates in an environment where, unemployment is going up and output is declining. So the next rate hike in late January will take place, or the next rate announcement rather will take place in late January. The next federal budget will take place in the wintertime of 2023, and it will also be in an environment of a recession. So difficult times ahead, and I think pretty much most of that is baked in the cake because, as Armine alluded to, in 10 months, we've seen a 4 percentage point increase in policy rates, which has meant 4 percentage point increases in household and business rates.
Well, we are certainly watching it very closely. We'll be getting more of an explanation from the Bank of Canada as this week goes on. But for now, Armine, Kevin, thank you for that. I appreciate the time today.
Thank you for having us.
Good to be with you.